Print runs. Yeah. New set announced. Sorry, I just got a new set announced. Right. Excited. I'm kind of more curious how they whammy me, to be honest. Right, with the card layout or card pool, and also the expansion slot. Right, what comes about from that? Very, very interesting to see. Overall, I'm not big on mechanologists. I'm not big on cyberpunk, in all honesty. Right, I like hardcore fantasy more so than futuristic fantasy. Although, actually, right, I just started watching Orville. It's quite good. Not a big Star Trek fan, but I don't know. The comedy variance in it is quite nice. Either way, print runs, right? This is what I want to talk about. I was going to talk about something else first, right? I was going to talk about card pool segmentation within sets, but I think we'll approach the numbers before we look at the actual segmentation. So, for instance, let's try again. What percentage of the player base, for instance, Monarch, is able to reach? Okay, so two slots to add here, essentially, right? Dusk Till Dawn, and then the new Bright Light sets. Curious. Okay, what is their print runs going to be, right? Do they factor in how much of the community they actually reach? So, for instance, Dusk Till Dawn. In all my thoughts, right? I was a part of the group thinking 200 to 300,000. In reality, I hope that's honestly not the case, right? I want it to be closer to 100,000 to 150,000. In all honesty, right? The reason for that is, obviously, as I've been collecting my thoughts, reading up on different articles, thinking about things to do these videos talking about print runs, it's just not feasible for it to be so high, right? For one, with the volume it's sold out, I don't think that leans itself to a higher volume, again, higher than Everfest. I also don't think that they have recouped to the growth or to the level of these sets. I think they are a lot more refined and restrained in terms of printing, and then also just in terms of all the cards in that set. Right, so we did the math in the previous one. Okay, 5,000 copies of each class-specific legendary. Right, is that necessary? For the Brute one, maybe, but also in the same set, we got the Shadow Brute helm. So you probably run the Shadow Brute helm in the Shadow Brute. So you don't need 5,000 plus copies, right? I think that's overkill, even for the Rainbow Force, right? As cheap as they are now, I think at that rate, they would be a lot cheaper. Because in all honesty, right, is there 5,000 diehard players for any specific class that want their legendary, right? The Rainbow Force legendary, who also don't want, say, the showy version, the Cold War version, right? Just to put that out there, okay? I don't think at the volume of 200,000 plus, having, close to 10,000 copies of each of the Rainbow Force legendaries is good. I was trying to think a better word, but yeah, just flat out, it's not good. It's not good for the health of the game at the moment, right? With the player community size and everything like that, Dusk Till Dawn, again, being a highly specialized set, I hoping that Legend Story Studios outsmarted me, right? And they were just laughing themselves silly when everyone was touting, it's going to be 250, it's going to be 200. Nah, we pulled back, we did the right thing in terms of the actual demographic that's hitting, and, at that volume, I have a much happier outlook for all the sets going forward, especially, obviously, the new Bright Light sets, right? The print run for this has to be small. Has to be small in perspective of the other sets, right? Again, to make the crack shuffle play work, there's only two avenues. Either it's Mechanologist only, or it's Mechanologist and combo cards, which I'm fine with, but again, it still has to be heavily Mechanologist themed. In that regard, right? You can't have the same volume as these other sets, right? It just wouldn't work. For instance, when Welcome to Wraith and Welcome to Wraith Unlimited came out, right? The split up amongst the collective, right? What heroes were available, who could play what heroes, and overall the card pool size was a lot smaller than it is nowadays, right? So getting away with these print numbers works better. As we expand, right, even though the player community is growing, even though, right, we want to ramp up production, we have to be more refined because, again, Welcome to Wraith, 4 of 4. Arcane Rising, 4 of 8. Crew, 8 of 8. Or 8 of 10. Or 10 of 10 if you count Cheyenne and Merchant, right? But when Unlimited came out, right, I'm pretty sure this was before Monarch, right? It went 1, 2, 3, then Welcome to Wraith, Monarch, Arc, or something like that. Hopefully I'm getting that right. Either way, still, if you include Monarch, still 4 of 12, right? And then you also have the fact that the Brute cards, the Warrior cards, the what's the other one? Runeblade cards, that's Arc, can be played with the Monarch heroes, right? So Welcome to Wraith overall has more accessibility and a higher demographic than Monarch. So it having a high print run is satisfactory to me. Now, this is what I want to really zero in on. The TBA, okay? So there are some important points to reference, mainly in Fab 2.0, right? So their view that first edition wasn't special anymore. Now, right, April. So this was conceptualized, most likely, again, here, between Tales and Everfest. And then put into action, obviously, after Everfest, where they decided we're not going to release the Unlimited print run, right? Now, the big question that I want to pose to you, do you think, given their mentality, given their desire for the first edition to work a certain way, do you think at any point, regardless of this statement, that there is more first edition than the Unlimited printing, right? That the ratio of first edition to Unlimited was heavily tilted towards Unlimited, right? Or the inverse, okay? Going from this statement to first edition now has more boxes than Unlimited just doesn't work in my mind, right? The only acceptable thought to me for Everfest is that they're equivalent, which is still scary, right? 229,000 first edition and possibly 229,000 Unlimited just sitting somewhere. For Everfest, though, I will say it is a bit more palatable, right? Because Everfest, again, like Crew, targets the entirety of play, unlike Dusk Till Dawn, right? So having a larger volume of the supplemental set does work because, again, more people want everything that's in Everfest, or I should say, want portions of Everfest for themselves. Whereas Monarch, there's a higher rate of, say, Illusionist-only cards, right, that only Illusionist players want. But yeah, so under that mentality, right, my expectation is that, again, the TBA will be equivalent, so 1 for 1, and that was the reason they stopped with Unlimited, because at 1-to-1, the first edition isn't special. But in that purview, right, we have, again, that statement that the ratio of first edition to Unlimited was heavily tilted towards Unlimited, as we see in Welcome to Wraith, Arcane Rising, and Crew, right? We went from, was this more than 10 times, and then roughly 4 times? 4 times. 4 times, right? So, again, 1 to 10, 1 to 10, 1 to 4, roughly. So for Monarch, right, 1 to what? 1 to 2, 1 to 3, 1 to 4. Which way do we go? Do we go up? Do we go down? I can't see it being 1 to 1, right? Because again, this thought hasn't entered their mind, right? Fab 2.0 wasn't conceptualized, wasn't thought about or perceived prior to Monarch or just after Monarch in my honest interpretation. It has to be conceptualized here, right? And then put into action here. Meaning that Monarch and Tales both have to suffer from some sort of ratio. Yes, they can be declining, right? Tales can be the 1 to 2. Monarch could then be the 1 to 3, 1 to 4, something like that. Or, you know, you play it safer. Monarch was 1 to 2. Tales was 1 to 1 point something, which I don't see realistic either, right? I think it has to stick to this. So again, 1 to 4, maybe 1 to 3, 1 to 2, 1 to 1, something like that. All of which, right? Any way you spin it. Well, actually, there's a different way to spin it, I should say. Imagine Monarch is 1 to 1. For whatever reason. Again, highly doubtful, but for whatever reason. Then all our valuations for the Coldfall variants, the only reason that their prices should be inflated is because of the boxes being inflated by stores trying to mark them up and sell them. But if it is 1 to 1, right, it means the population of Rainbow Falls to Coldfalls is equivalent, and the pull rates are equivalent. Okay, so the Rainbow Fall isn't necessarily cheaper, or shouldn't be cheaper, than the Coldfall at 1 to 2, right? The ratio we see now is probably unrealistic. What is the ratio? It is just over 2.5 at the moment, right? Again, if we bring the pull rates, bring the boxes into similar approximations, again, if we say the ratio is closer to 1 to 1, then that valuation, you know, needs some shaking up. in all honesty, right, would we, if the pull rates were equivalent, what would you value more? I would value the rainbow foil. I think for a lot of cards, especially bright cards like this, the rainbow foil looks better than the cold foil. So curious, very curious. Actually, yeah, sold. It's only 1 to 2. Yeah, it's just food for thought, right? Where do you sit? Again, to me, we'll say 1 to 4. No, we'll say 1 to 3, right? Because it's not supplemental. That still means that, to be announced is the hard evidence that there are in total circulation, right? 600,000 boxes of Monarch. 600,000 is huge for Flesh and Blood at the moment. Again, for a highly specialized card game, so to speak, right? Where Monarch, again, is targeting 4 heroes, right? You can throw in the base versions, the normal Warrior, the normal Runeblade, and the normal Brute if you want. But still, 7 out of the entire population at the moment, right? And that population is going to dwindle and dwindle and dwindle as they continue to add different variants. So altogether, 600,000 is a huge jump up from these sets, right? Double. Okay, even if you were to say 1 to 2, 300 something thousand, it's still a sizable increase over, which again, we suffered from COVID inflation. But then for Tails Neverfest, right? Again, if it's 1 to 1, right? 450,000. If it's 1 to 2, 600,000. If it's 1 to 1, it's still 400,000 boxes of Tails. Again, another highly specialized set where you just increase the hero pool again by another 4. So altogether, what am I trying to get at? For Uprising, Dynasty, and Outsiders, what could the theoretical print runs be? Well, I would hope, personally, that they really gutted it, right? That we went back to the 100,000 to 200,000 range, at most. Again, we're adding in new heroes. We're continuing to segment the player population, and we are approaching less and less of a core demographic with each set. Again, Dynasty is the outlier, right? Because it's a supplemental set, and it has cards for every player, right? So it reaches all, was it at this point, I think 20 or 22 heroes, or 21 because of Assassin, right? Plus then you have the Assassin factor as well in Dynasty, right? So Dynasty is more sought after because it's the way to jumpstart Assassin. I think including the new heroes in supplementals is interesting. Do I like it more than core sets? No, because you have the draftable element in core sets, so you can have a easier way to start learning and playing. But yeah, altogether, what I would like to see is Uprising be 150,000, something around there, right? Pull back, refined. Understand that this box is not going to reach everyone, right? Really, really factor in those variables. Dynasty. It's acceptable to go close to 300,000 because again, it's supplemental, everyone wants it. And we need to see that thought, right? That this is a supplemental set. Sorry. I shouldn't say this is a supplemental set because Dust Till Dawn breaks the mold. But this is a supplemental set that does expand the entirety of play and therefore should be designed by the entirety of the player base. Versus Uprising, which only features three heroes this time, right? Fae, Dromai, and Icelander. Yeah, so 3. And then you've got the duplicates. There's some Illusionist cards, so I guess Prism. There's some Wizard cards, so Arcane Rising. And then there's some Ninja cards, although the combo mechanic is sort of stripped away and you want the base combo cards. I don't know. Again, in my head, I like to just count the core heroes featured in it. So for instance, I treat Fae, even though you can use the Ninja cards, as separate to any other Ninja. But yeah, regardless of that, right? 3 out of 20, say. Or 6 out of 20 if you want to be generous. Still, needs to be proportional, right? Despite the growth in player base, despite the growth in the company, I think these sets need to be refined and pulled out, and I think that's what we're seeing because we're getting what's in this year. We're getting the most sets by far. And I think there is room and a high possibility that we do see another set right before Christmas. I mean, it's kind of ludicrous for a company not to release some sort of product at Christmas, being, Christmas. So yeah, altogether, I'm just hoping that they factor that in. So again, for me, 150,000 for Uprising would be the sweet spot. For Dynasty, you can go a bit greater, 200, 250, 300,000. 300,000 might be pushing it. And then Outsiders, you have to pull back again. Keep it equivalent to Uprising, maybe a bit less, because again, you're only targeting a core demographic that you have now expanded with Uprising. Okay, and then Dusk Till Dawn, right? So in that theme, it's a supplemental set. It's not draftable, okay, and does not reach the entirety of play. Even if you be generous and you consider the 1 to 2 cards that the extra heroes got as making it desirable to more people, right? It still does not hit all 24 heroes at this point. 24 heroes in terms of classic constructed. So its print run at 300,000 to me is overkill. At 250,000 is overkill. Is at 200,000 is still bit of overkill, right? I think that 100,000 to 150,000 is the sweet spot for me for Dusk Till Dawn. And again, ramp up the amount of sets in the year. Don't ramp up the size of each set with the way we're going with the design of Flesh of Fire. Again, with Bright Lights, if this is heavily specialized, it needs to be heavily reduced, because not everyone is going to pick up these cards. Who's this look like? The more I look at it. Benedict Cumberbatch with a mustache? No. I want to say Dr. Disrespectful too, right? If he takes his gear off a little bit. It's on the tip of my tongue. Let me know. Who do you think that looks like? Right? Our little Nikola Tesla? What was I going to say? I was going to say Nicolo, like Teclo. Anyway, yeah, print runs. How do you feel? I think we are overestimating the growth. I think I was underestimating Legend Story Studios. I think that they do understand that they have a smaller demographic with each set, right? They have to. And I do think that the print runs are going to be pulled back. I think it's going to be surprising. I think that there's nuance to read into when they announce things. So for instance, this, right, is what some may have considered a big number a year ago, still a big number today, right? That seems a bit on the nose. That, again, they are taking these new variables into account. And even though Uprising is 2.0, right, it does not have the print volume of, say, even Monarch, of possibly Crew, of possibly Arcane Rising. Again, 200,000 is fine. I would like to see it under 200,000, because again, specialist. Especially at this point where you had people burn out, people leave, especially stores leave, right? I think Uprising be 100,000, 150,000 is somewhat realistic. And then Dynasty, again, go back up because it's a supplemental set. Then Outsiders go way back down, on par with Uprising. Again, maybe smaller, because we haven't seen that huge influx of players, but we have obviously seen greater segmentation. And then, yeah, I think they have factored it all in. I think that's the realistic thing to think about. Very interesting to see what they bring, and hopefully we do get these numbers. Right? I do think this is going to be shocking. I do think this is going to be really, really, I don't want to say grievous, right? It's not their fault. It's not highly a negative thing, but it will shake up all these boxes. All these boxes are dirt, right? Again, at 1-to-1. The lowest in my head that it could possibly be. So still 250,000 boxes of Monarch floating about. 400,000 Tails. 450,000 Everfest. That's insane. And that's 1-to-1. Again, the mentality that they can't have before Everfest. If you read into the articles, if you understand their mentality of wanting first edition to be smaller than Unlimited, right? 1-to-1 just doesn't work. Even for Everfest, I would say that 1-to-1 wasn't there yet, right? Uprising is technically 1-to-1, right? So that was what they put into place. So Everfest, to me, right, when they conceptualized it, when they went and decided to start printing, they would have put in orders that weren't 1-to-1. I mean, they could have cut orders, right, once they decided they weren't releasing the Unlimited, but it doesn't seem realistic for me to think that any of these sets could be 1-to-1, right? They have to be greater than 1-to-1. They have to be between 1-to-1 and 1-to-4, given Crew. Or, 1-to-10, if you count Wonder Wraith and Arcane Rising as the somewhat pinnacle, with Crew being somewhat measured or refined due to what it does do and introduce. So yeah, I don't know, 250,000 to 600,000 for Monarch.